Well, thank you, Jerry, and good morning. I was looking forward to this after Mary Kramer gave me the news. I found pretty surprising that I got a good rating for last year's speech. Warren Buffett was ahead of me, so I assume some ballots got lost somewhere. But how many people were here last year? Okay, so a good number of you. So you heard this speech once before. I'm kidding. How many of you are here from out of town? Oh my God, well that's terrific. So, you know the connection you feel. I don't have to explain it to you, although I was reflecting on it this week. You might have seen in the paper, my father retired yesterday from the federal bench after 40 years as a judge, and we spent a lot of time with family. His mother lived to be 90 years old, lived all 90 years of her life in the city of Detroit. And when my father got a job in the 1960s at a law firm in Livonia and moved the family out of the city, I was a young boy, but I felt a sense of loss leaving Detroit that never left me. And so when I got the opportunity to come back and participate, it was an emotional thing. And as my father says, what he thinks is even more surprising than me being the mayor is that 4 of his adult grandchildren have gotten out of school and moved back to Detroit. And so we're seeing something that for generations nobody thought would happen. And so those of you who were here last year know that every Wednesday morning at our cabinet meeting, our team gets up and reports in on one thing. We have one goal, and that's reverse Detroit's population decline, and we live with these numbers. And many of you are in those numbers, right? I mean, we went from 1,000,008 to 688,000. We've had a loss of population every year for nearly 60 years. And as far as I'm concerned, the only standard I want to be measured by is whether the population of this city starts to grow, because it means more people will want to live here than move out. And every single thing we do is designed around that strategy. And so Jerry Norcia and DT have been great partners, but when I started a year and a half ago, street lights in this city were dark. It was depressing. A lot of times in government, at the end of the week, you go home and your kids say, "What did you do?" and you can't really explain it to them. When you're putting the street lights on, you actually can see what's done at the end of the week. And so when you were here a year ago, we had 20,000 street lights installed, and this is what I showed you then. The yellow areas were fully lit. The green areas we started on, and the rest of the city was dark. And I'm happy to say today, we have 55,000 lights in, and every neighborhood is lit across the city. And so people can feel the difference. And this is it. Block after block used to look like this, and now it looks like this. And the main streets, we did the neighborhoods first and the main streets second, but the main streets are being lit to a standard you could read a magazine at night. And if you drive down Jefferson or Grand River, you'll actually see them putting up the poles on the main streets right now. Ambulance service, again, I live by metrics. This is what we do in our administration. We started, there were stories where it was an hour before an ambulance came, some tragic circumstances. We had 13 on the road. When you were here a year ago, I was pretty proud of the fact we cut it to 13 minutes and 44 seconds. And last week, we're down to 9 minutes on ambulance response time. It wasn't easy. We hired 100 new EMTs. We've got 38 working ambulances, so now we have 24 on the road, but we can maintain the others. And we just put in a new system where when you call 911 for a sore leg, we no longer dispatch the ambulance. We find a more appropriate way to respond. And it's amazing now. People have come to accept the fact ambulances show up when you call. In other cities, that's a given. In Detroit, it took some work. Bus service, as Jerry mentioned, I ran the smart bus system. There was nothing more heartbreaking than the bus service. You need 188 buses to make schedule, and in January there were 138. You would drive through this city. Remember how brutal that winter was 2 winters ago? I mean, people just standing on the corner. They'd be waiting an hour for a bus to show up, and God help you if you had to make a connection, because not only did you have to wait for an hour for the main bus, but you had to stand out there and wait an hour for the connection. You couldn't rely on a bus. to get to work, to get to school. So when you were here a year ago, we got that up to 164. And last week, not only we get out the whole 188, but we beat it. We are making full schedule on the buses. And for the third of the households in this city that don't have a bus, this is huge. The bus service is opportunity. Everything in this town starts with a job, but if you can't get to the job, you have no path. And so it took hiring 100 new drivers, it took 30 new mechanics, but the big thing was we needed new buses. The buses we had were so broken down, our mechanics would take buses that had been nearly totaled in a crash, put them back together and put them on the road because that's all we had. But with the federal government's help, we bought 80 new buses. Vice President Joe Biden was enormously helpful in the process, and I promised him if he got me 80 buses, we would make schedule. And so 10 days ago, he came out, and we put the last 4 buses on the road, and he joined us to celebrate. In fact, he wanted to ride the bus with me out in Grand River and collect the fares, but the Secret Service wouldn't go along with that. But it gives you a sense of how the country is behind us. Our DPW team, I just got so tired of how dirty this city looked. I mean, people just dump stuff and nobody cared. And so we've been picking up 650 tons of trash every single week, week in and week out. Sites that look like this now look like this, and sites that look like that now look like this, and sites that look like that now look like that. 650 tons a week. And now we're to the point where we can actually start arresting the dumpers because people are going out and confronting them and taking camera pictures with their iPhones, and we're going out and arresting people because it's the craziest thing. When you establish an expectation it's going to be clean, the neighbors buy in and want to keep it that way. And you could feel the difference in this community. Something we've done since you were here last is we put City Hall on your smartphone. And when I ran for office, a number of you know the story, I ran by saying to people, if you invite me into your home, I'll show up. And I went to 250 house parties. I sat in living rooms, in basements, in dens, all across the city every single night. And the one thing residents said to me over and over is, you can't call City Hall. Somebody dumped some garbage on the lot next to me. Do I call DPW? Do I call GSD? Do I call the ombudsman? Do I call the mayor's office? Do I call my council member? When I call, I get a voicemail. Nobody calls me back. Nobody at City Hall cares. So I went and recruited the woman I believe to be the finest municipal IT director in the country, Beth Niblock from Louisville. I drove down to Louisville, and I didn't come back until she came with me. She hadn't been to Michigan before, but she loves it here now. And so I said, Beth, I want to set up a 311 system. We got all these departments. Nobody knows who to call. Nobody calls back. I need you to fix the 311 system in these departments. And Beth said to me, you are so 1980s. She says, we don't need a telephone system. She says, we'll put it on an app. And so she started something we call Improve Detroit. And it went in last May. You can get it on your phone. And it allows you to log onto your phone and report street light out, stop side down, running water in a basement, illegal dump site, etc. And when you put it in, you immediately get an email back from us. Thank you for your request. We'll be out there. If we need follow-up information, we text you. And when it's closed, we send you a message telling you the problem's resolved. Just as importantly, I get a weekly report. And everybody has a service standard. It's 48 hours to replace a street light. It's 24 hours to stop running water. And I get a report every single week from every department on how we're responding. 70% of all complaints coming into city government now come in on the smartphone, the Improve Detroit app. People feel now like City Hall actually responds, and I didn't have to figure out how to get 20 departments to answer the telephone and call back. We're starting to get smarter, and we're starting to get the people to believe that city government cares. Blight is a big part of what I live with every day, and we're taking houses down at a rate of 100 to 150 a week. The next largest blight elimination program in America is Cleveland, which has an outstanding reputation for their efficiency. They take down 15 to 20 a week. Okay? Nobody's ever seen anything of this magnitude. But so much of it looks like this block. I mean, look at you're the house next door. And this is what we see across the city. We'll have a beautiful occupied house with kids living in it next to a house like that. And so what we have done is this. Historically, this city was knocking down houses in what I would call a mindless pattern. There'd be 5 abandoned houses on a block, and the demo crew would come down the block, they'd knock down one house, and they'd leave. They wouldn't have changed anything on the block. The exodus continued. And so we got $100 million in federal demolition money, and the feds said, we want it concentrated in specific areas, which makes great sense. And so when I started, these were the areas the feds were allowing us to demolish. I convinced them to expand them to every neighborhood in the city that's at least 80% occupied. So Dan Gilbert and his Blight Task Force just did this phenomenal thing of creating a tool that we can see where every abandoned house is. And here really is the point. If you go to a block that has 20 good houses and one burned out house, and you knock down that burned out house, you have increased the property values of the other 20 houses on the block. If you go to another neighborhood where there's 2 occupied houses and 10 burned out houses, and you knock down a burned out house, you haven't changed anything. And so I've done dozens of community meetings where I show the map. And I said, this isn't going to be political. Every neighborhood in this city that has at least 4 houses out of 5 occupied, we're going to target our efforts, and in the other areas, we'll get to you. And in January, we're making enough progress, we're going to expand to the neighborhoods now that not are 80% occupied, but are 75% occupied. So you see the blue areas, these are the next areas we're moving to. And I hope in 6 months after that, we'll move to the areas that are 70% occupied. We are moving across the city, strongest neighborhood to weak. And I'll show you the results are working. So we did 4,000 demolitions last year. Every blue dot is a demolition. You can see how we concentrated them in areas adjoining our strongest neighborhoods. And we're going to do another 4,000 this year. And again, you can see the concentration. Now we're starting to spread out some, but every single demolition decision is made off of data. So what does it mean? Why are we demolishing in the strongest areas? Because there are a whole lot of vacant houses in this city that are beautiful. Solid brick structures, people left in the foreclosure crisis in 2008 that do not have to be knocked down. But if you have a beautiful vacant brick building and it's got 2 burned out buildings on the block, you're not moving in. But when we went through and cleaned out the bad houses, we said, let's go get the good houses and sell them. And we started filing lawsuits against the owners of these vacant houses. And we filed the lawsuits on a nuisance theory that says you cannot maintain your property in a way that is a nuisance to your neighbor. And so you have 2 choices when you're sued. You either sign a court order to get it fixed up and occupied in 6 months, which is what I want. I want you to fix it up. I don't want the house. Or you can deed it to us and we'll sell it on the internet like eBay. And when you were here a year ago, we had just started the auction site. Here's the interesting thing. We're filing 50 suits a week, and you see those kind of red and blue dotted lines? We're doing an entire neighborhood at once. So instead of scattering around the city, we'll file 50 suits, take 50 vacant houses the same day. And that day, we will go and poster every house in that neighborhood that's vacant with this poster saying the house is about to be seized, call us and reach a settlement. Everything is being done methodically. And so 15 months. How much can you actually sue in 15 months? Well, it turns out quite a bit. 2,927 lawsuits against owners of abandoned houses that we have filed. 499 of them signed a consent agreement. They're fixing up the house. I got almost 500 houses being fixed up and people moving in without us having to do anything. Another 1,000 we took title to. We've sold almost 500 of those on the auction site. And the interesting thing is, we haven't lost a single suit. Now, one time was somebody able to go in and convince the judge, yeah, they left the house abandoned, but no, judge, I shouldn't be forced to fix it up or turn it over to the city. And so now, they aren't even bothering to fight us. After you've won 2,000 or 3,000 in a row, they aren't bothering to fight us anymore. And so the program's working. The auction site, if you haven't checked it out, buildingdetroit.org. Anybody who's interested in moving back to the city, we have some great bargains. It's good if you have some skills at home renovation, given the condition of some of these buildings. But this is what the website looks like. And our typical sales price is under $10,000. We've had some go as much as $100,000 in the Boston Edison neighborhood. And so just to give you a sense, this house on Mansfield on the west side, auctioned for $20,000. Now look at that. Can you believe somebody walked away from that house? But what happened is a bunch of other people walked away from their houses, and so they did too. This house on Edinburgh was auctioned for $36,000. This house on West Outer Drive, those of you who are from Detroit, you can't imagine that people walked away from houses on Outer Drive. Sold for $40,000. We are auctioning 3 every single day. Starts at 9 in the morning, ends at 5 at night, 7 days a week, and people are moving into these neighborhoods. And so this is where we started, in the area behind Marygrove College a year ago. This was the very first house that signed a consent agreement pursuant to a lawsuit. And here's how it looks today. And so, is this stuff working? This house on Prevost, when we sued, here's how it looks today. This house on Yorkshire on the east side, East English Village, beautiful neighborhood. Here's how it looks today. Another house on Yorkshire. Here's how it looked a year ago. Here's how it looked today. This is what I get to do all day. I drive these neighborhoods. I get a little map in my car. This house on Ohio in the Marygrove neighborhood, here's how it looks today. And if you want to see what the insides look like, here's the inside of that Ohio house at the time we took it in the lawsuit. Here's how it looks today. A bedroom in the Ohio house, and here's how it looks today. This is what we are doing hundreds and hundreds of times because people want to move back to the city. Boston Edison, this house on Longfellow. Look at the inside of this. Can you imagine somebody walked away from that house? Here's how it looks today. Can you see why I enjoy this job? Okay? You can feel what's going on in this city. Over and over, people are moving back in. And so just look at that. Can you imagine being a neighbor living on that block and what you were living with a year ago and now what you have on your block today? Now the neighbors are painting their gutters. They're planting flowers. We're seeing property values increase across the city because this is working. And so this is the Marygrove neighborhood, and Dan Gilbert's database gives us his tool. 136 vacant houses. The original report a year ago said we had to demolish 136. Because we have gone in with these lawsuits, this is our maps every week. As they start off as vacant, as we sue and somebody signs a court order, we make them yellow. As we take title to them, we make them light green. As they're either fixed up and occupied or demolished, we make them dark green. So every neighborhood in the city we're suing on, the map is changing from red to green every week, but we're only going to have to demolish 35 houses. We saved 100 houses in one neighborhood that people are moving into. Boston Edison, we had 142 vacant houses scheduled for demolition a year ago. We're only going to have to demolish 2 because we intervened on the neighborhood. East English Village over by Grosse Pointe, if you haven't seen it, what a beautiful neighborhood. 265 houses vacant a year ago. We're only going to have to demolish 8. This is what is going on in the city. And so this is the single most important thing I'm going to show you, which is what's happened to single-family home prices. Anybody hear somebody say downtown and midtown are going great, but what about the neighborhoods? Right? 90% of the time, the person that says that does not live in the city of Detroit, because that statement reflects complete ignorance of what is going on. What is really going on is the neighborhoods that we are targeting are coming back faster than other neighborhoods. It's uneven. But so here's the map that I'll show you. This comes off the MLS real estate database as of Monday. Single-family home sales, 2014 through 2015. So on that map, the white areas had less than 5 sales. So you got Hamtramck and Highland Park in the middle of the city that, of course, that we don't count as ours. You've got the State Fairgrounds up at the top of the picture. You've got Rouge Park. Anything in the downtown, midtown area, it's condos and lofts, so it doesn't show up as single-family home sales. And other white areas of the city there, they just have so little there were less than 5 sales. In the red areas, the sales price this year has declined from last year. We got work to do in those areas. The light green areas, last year to this year, were up between 0 and 25%. The dark green areas, the sales price this year is publicly reported by the real estate database. The dark green areas, the property values are up more than 25% from a year ago. Look how many dark green areas you have across the city. So yes, downtown and midtown are doing very well, but there are neighborhoods across this city doing very well. And for those of you who might be interested in apartments or condos or commercial, the real estate patterns track almost identical. That where the commercial properties are going up is the areas adjacent to where the residential properties are going up. Because when people start to fill in East English Village, the East Warren strip adjacent to that is now starting to get activity on the commercial side. And so if you're wondering, gee, did I miss the boat? I'll give you a sense of it. Everybody knows Rosedale out on the west side, the North Rosedale neighborhood. Give you a sense of how this works. In 2014, the average sales price in North Rosedale was $60,000. This year, it's over $75,000. It's up about 27%. Sounds like maybe you missed your opportunity, except that in 2008, North Rosedale homes went for over $150,000. And so what we're seeing is we're starting to go the right direction, but there is a long way to go. Most of the rest of America has recovered almost 100% in the property values from 2008. In Detroit, we're still 50% below, even with this map. But this is pretty encouraging when you see how many areas are seeing growth, because what does it mean when property values are going up? More people want to move into those neighborhoods and leave. And so we're seeing the population start to turn. Outside of the neighborhoods, the rest of the city is doing pretty well. East Riverfront, Faye Nelson and the Riverfront Conservancy, she's now at DTE Foundation. But here's how it looked 10 years ago. Many of you may remember it that way. Here's how it looks today. All right. Gabriel Richard Park at the foot of the Belle Isle Bridge 10 years ago. Here's how it looks today. All right. Next to the Renson Riverfront Plaza, here's how it looks today. Okay, this is changing. The light rail, if you've been here at all, you've seen the mess of traffic on Woodward. You probably couldn't get in the front of the DIA today. But in 2017, we're going to have a rail line operating down there. And within 6 blocks of that rail line from downtown to Grand Boulevard, every building is being renovated. Buildings that have been empty for 20 years are being renovated. This is the Brush Park area north of the stadiums, where we've got a new housing program started with Dan Gilbert's team. Orleans Landing has started just east of the riverfront. It's under construction right now. Broderick Tower, vacant for 20 years. This is right adjacent to the stadiums, now open and fully leased. Last year, they had a reception for this group at the Whitney. Been vacant for 15 years. My dentist was there. I was really angry when it finally closed. My dentist, I think, was the last tenant. Been vacant for 15 years and now fully occupied and open. This is happening over and over. And those who were here last year saw the beautiful restoration. But it's a 6-month wait list now. Any place within probably a half a mile of where we're sitting today. And we've got Fortune 500 companies coming back. Ally Bank was about to put 1,400 people in the suburbs. And with a partnership with General Motors, with Bedrock, and the city, they decided to consolidate all 1,400 employees in downtown Detroit. When they move in, if you come back next year, the traffic will be even worse than it was this weekend, but we're gonna find a way to deal with that. Fifth Third Bank is in the process of moving their headquarters downtown. So we've got companies moving in. The Lightweight Metal Institute that's going to manufacture the next generation of steel for cars and ships is now opening in Corktown. So the next generation manufacturing is going to be done here in the city. A company from India, Sakti, that makes car parts. 650 employees of the former Southwestern High School site in southwest Detroit. There was a time where there was construction in the city, everybody knew where it was. Now I drive by and I have to call and say, what is this building going up? That's a really good feeling. So I could show you a lot of pictures. I thought instead, I want to tell you what my life has been like for the last 10 days. To give you an idea of what it's like to be mayor of Detroit, I was really good at my timing on when I chose to run. Week before last, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JPMorgan Chase, they've invested $100 million here. They cut the ribbon on a 36-unit apartment complex in Midtown that they paid to renovate. So when the CEO of the country's largest bank comes to town for ribbon cutting, you got a sense of how much they're behind us. the long-closed Brewster-Wheeler Rec Center, the place where Joe Louis trained when he was world champion, the place where Diana Ross and others spent a lot of their time growing up in the Brewster projects. People thought it was given up for demolition, but one of your hosts here, Casey Crane, this week, started the restoration of the Brewster-Wheeler Rec Center. It's going to be a destination restaurant. You're going to be able to eat outside or on the patio. I don't know if it'll be next year or the year after, but a historic building, instead of being demolished, is being renovated by a local developer. Herman Kiefer Hospital was going to have to be demolished. You may remember it as a TB hospital. A New York developer, Ron Castellano, just got approved by City Council for a $75 million renovation for housing in the new center area. That was this week. Here you have the area south of West Grand Boulevard, pretty blight-ridden, and this morning, Henry Ford Hospital officially announced they are building a $110 million outpatient cancer center on that site. They are going to transform that entire neighborhood. That announcement is today. Lafayette Park, we have another Detroit developer, Walter Cohen, who just broke ground on a 185-unit residential construction in Lafayette Park because the demand for the housing is so high. Amazon. There was a competition between Ann Arbor and Detroit for Amazon's tech center in Michigan, where they're going to hire the software engineers to take all the retailers onto their website, and they picked Detroit. And in that picture with me is the governor, and Mark Schlissel, the president of the University of Michigan. We had the presidents of U of M and Michigan State come to Detroit because Amazon concluded that when these kids want to get out of school, they don't want to live in the college town anymore. They want to come back to the city. Did you think you'd see the day Amazon would put its stake in the ground in the city of Detroit? And so Dan Gilbert and I had to cut short, run out before the Amazon announcement was over, because there was another announcement down the street that the Lear Corporation decided to move a design center into the city of Detroit in Capitol Park, and they wanted to be there because they wanted the young people from Wayne State and the Center for Creative Studies to be tracked right into their design center for car parts and interior designs, and they wanted to be associated with the college kids here. And what was really dramatic is this is the first building Dan Gilbert sold. Lear bought it from him. Now you think about this. 5 years ago, what Dan was buying, everybody says, what is this guy doing? Now they're knocking on the door and trying to buy from him. Now there's a sign of Detroit's recovery, and I was a little surprised he sold, but it's a good thing for the city that people are now trying to buy from Dan. And so the hockey arena that's going to open next year, the excitement is great, and so the way we feel right now is nothing's going to stop Detroit. We're glad you're here, and we hope you find things to do with us. And if I haven't used all of my time, anybody have any questions? Go ahead. Can you tell me your name and where you're from?
Yes, my name is Ruth Verhoff, and I live in California, but I grew up in Detroit, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you for all you're doing. Yes, and I was wondering, we were looking at buying homes here, but we were non-residents, and we were not permitted to buy homes. This is about a year ago. Has that changed?
If you're going to move here, you can buy the home.
I'm dying to move back
Yes,
here.
the answer is yes. So is there anybody here from the land bank? Okay, so here's Alexis Wiley. Alexis, would you stand up, please? Alexis Wiley is our chief of staff, and she is personally going to handle your auction bid so that you can buy a home and move in. All right? So Alexis is our real estate agent if anybody else wants a house. She's actually looking at East English Village herself. She can give you some tips. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Oh. Hi, I'm Royal Bryson. I'm from the Detroit. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. A long time ago, I heard talk about shrinking the city. Your infrastructure can't support it. You went from 1.8 million to 688,000. Is that still a plan, or what's going to happen with that?
Yeah, shrinking the city to me is an insensitive phrase. It caused my predecessor a great deal of damage because here's what you find. Even in neighborhoods where there's 3 or 4 houses left, you've got a lady who's lived there for 40 years, who's painting her fence, who's planting her flowers, who raised her family in the neighborhood, and is not going to move. You cannot go to her to say, we're turning off the lights and stopping to maintain the road, you got to move. And that was the original message, and people reacted to it as severely, badly as you would expect. What we are doing instead is saying every neighborhood has a future. That future may not be entirely filled with homes. And so as we have progressed from improving the strongest neighborhoods, we're going to move next to offering voluntary options for people to move from some of the weaker neighborhoods into the stronger neighborhoods. And we just got a significant grant, $9 million from the federal government to go with what we're doing in our local water system. But we have a problem. August of last year, we had, 20,000 houses flooded in a rainstorm because it overwhelmed our storm sewer capacity. We are building a major green infrastructure project. We're going to take this broad swath of vacant land and use them to hold the water on site in retention ponds and the like, so we don't have to build some billion-dollar underground storage system. And so we're going to reuse land in constructive ways like gardening and green infrastructure and the like. I don't see that as shrinking the city. I see that as making sensible uses neighborhood by neighborhood, but shrinking the city is not a phrase that we use. Go ahead.
Bob Keel from Charleston, South Carolina, along with my wife, Shawn. We lived here for many years. Thanks for your service, Mr. Mayor. Talk a little bit about the crime statistics, especially violent crime and the murder rates. Where do we stand on that? What's the plan and the strategy for reducing violence in Detroit?
This city is much too violent. We are, I predict this year, going to have the fewest number of murders since the mid-1960s, but that's not a record to be proud of. We are still much too violent. We have a police chief, James Craig, who is just outstanding. And we're getting smarter. So, for example, we have brought in the Boston strategy of ceasefire. We'll have a little under 300 murders this year. There was a time when there were 700. But if we had the same murder rate as Boston, we would have 80 this year. And so I, along with the U.S. Attorney Barb McQuaid, the prosecutor, the police chief, brought in a number of gang members from the 9th Precinct on the east side of Detroit, most violent area of the city, brought them into a room and sat with them and said, look, you have a murder rate in this neighborhood that's higher than anything they're seeing in the Middle East. And the people who are most likely to be the victims are you. And so in some cases, you're most likely to be the shooters. We brought in people who were on parole or probation for violent offenses and the like, connected with gangs. And we said, here's the thing. The next shooting that occurs, we're not only trying to find the shooter, which usually we get, but sometimes we don't. We are going to bring every bit of resources we have to everybody remotely connected with the shooter. Their brother, their next door neighbor, their high school classmate, etc. And so you need to tell people to stop. In the 8 weeks since we've had them in, the shootings have almost come to a halt. And it's worked in Boston, it's worked in other places. We're bringing it area by area. The other thing that we're doing, and I don't know if the media is covering this, I don't know how much I want to say, but we're probably with cranes they are. But we are partnering on a major technology initiative. It's not all about more police officers, it's giving the officers the tools to do their job. But I could see the day in the not-too-distant future when gas stations and party stores and drive-thru that are points of vulnerability for carjackings and shootings are all hooked up to a central camera system with bright lighting that can be monitored out of the Detroit Police Department. And I think by January, we're going to have a demonstration in place with volunteer gas stations where if there's an incident at a gas station and somebody calls 911, somebody in police headquarters will be able to rewind that tape, take a snapshot of the perpetrator, put it out to the police cars on patrol in that precinct to their laptop with a picture with the car and the like. These are the kinds of things we're going to do. So we are going to keep grinding away and grinding away. Overall crime is down, but as long as the shootings continue, it doesn't feel any safer. And so we're just going to keep chipping away at it. But I think these new strategies are going to work. Yes?
Teresa Sebastian from the the Dominion Asset Group. Question, it's great that families are looking at moving back into Detroit, but the school system is going to be a big part of getting families here. Can you tell me a little bit about what the city is doing and what the school district is doing?
Well, the school district for the last 5 years has been under the control of a governor-appointed emergency manager. And in this city, we have 200 schools, 100 Detroit public schools and 100 charter schools. The Detroit public schools, you look at objective reading and math scores, are the worst performing public school system in the country. The charter schools on average, we have some very successful ones, but the charter schools on average are not doing any better than the public schools. And we have a system today of total chaos. There's 12 different entities that can charter schools, and schools pop up and close around this city with no rhyme or reason. We had a point a couple years ago where 6 schools opened in southwest Detroit the same year, destabilized every school that was there. And yet we have Brightmoor with a 15-square-mile area with no high school. And so the governor has proposed something, and I proposed some alternatives that I'm really optimistic we'll get through in Lansing that will address this in a significant way and establish a local education commission that sets standards for all the schools, provides resources for them to make the goals, opens those schools where we need them, puts schools that aren't performing on probation, and ultimately addresses the issues. And I think you're going to see, hopefully the governor and I and the legislature will come together in the next few months, because we know if we don't teach these kids in these classrooms, the trends we're seeing in Detroit neighborhoods aren't going to continue. And I assume the fact, Jim, that you're standing here means I've run over time.
That's great. You're great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
I've run over.